Thank you, Nanda. We are behind schedule, so I will not go much into the background. We had a phenomenal first session. We got very interesting insights. So we'll go straight into the legal and constitutional dimensions. We have Mr. Alok Prasanna, the co-founder of the Vidhi Center for Legal Policy, an acknowledged expert in policy. Mr. N. Ram, a legendary figure, not only a journalist, but he has deep insights into various aspects of Indian society, which we very highly value, sir. And we have Dr. Nanda Kishor, the head of Politics and International Studies at Pondicherry University, also known in the policy circles. So we have a very fine panel here. Delimitation, as the word says, is to fix territorial boundaries. It is meant to give effect to the constitutional promise of equal representation, ensuring every vote has equal weight. However, over time, the legal and constitutional architecture has evolved in a way that challenges the balance between democratic equality, federal justice, and political pragmatism as we know today. So I will start straight away. I will dive into the subject. When we speak of delimitation, the constitutional provisions which deal with delimitation are Article 81 and 82. 81 deals with the composition of the Lok Sabha, the House of the People. It says that they must be chosen by direct election. The ratio of seats to population must be the same for all states as far as practical. Ratio between the seats within the state must be same as far as possible. The population to be taken for delimitation is the population of the previous census published. The first delimitation was supposed to happen in 1971. Through a couple of amendments it was pushed, and now the current date is 2026. As law students, we have all learnt that originally law started as, or it was defined as, the command of the sovereign. Thereafter it evolved to say that law is a codification of social norms. Thereafter, they said law is an instrument of social change. So in this background, when we are looking at delimitation, which should have originally happened in 1971, the question I have is, should India rethink the very idea of representation to move from arithmetic-based seat count to a strategic blend of various factors which include population, land area, state gross domestic product, socio-economic factors such as performance, contribution, culture, etc. So I will start with Alok. I would like him to speak about the constitutional provisions. Is it possible? It is a realm of possibilities, and then I will move to the other panelists.
Thank you, Dr. Vinod. Let me start by saying something that it was on my mind when I'm thinking about delimitation. It's not about arithmetic. It's not even about federalism. I want to frame this debate essentially as a debate about democracy and fraternity. I'm not using the word versus. Versus means that they're opposing values. They're not opposing values. Our constitution and our preamble puts all these values together and says the way India has to be governed is through all these values. You don't choose one and say this is better or that is worse. And at the heart of it, and these words are in our preamble, is the dignity of the individual. The idea of one person, one vote comes from the fundamental idea that every individual has value. In fact, in our Constituent Assembly, people said, why do we need universal suffrage for India? I mean, we look at these people, only 10% of them are literate. What will they know about voting? They won't know anything. But our founding fathers and mothers said no. In fact, they were ridiculed around the world. People said, look at this country trying to do universal suffrage with 10% literacy, it won't last 10 years. And we proved them wrong. We've said that the average Indian man or woman is perfectly capable of understanding how power works, how governance works, knows the value of his or her vote. And it doesn't matter if they're in the bustling metropolis of Chennai or Bangalore or Delhi, or whether in a remote hamlet somewhere in Bihar or Uttar Pradesh, they know the value of their vote. So I think when we start reducing democracy to arithmetic or numbers, we start taking away a very core fundamental idea of our constitution. And that idea is not democracy or federalism. That idea is the dignity of the individual. So our constitution being built on this idea, we cannot do away with it. We have to give one person, one vote, and one value. Is there only one way to do it? No. There are multiple ways to do it. And I will cite the work of my colleagues at Vidhi, who have given about 5 or 6 ways which it can be done within our constitutional framework. I'm not going to spend too much time on that in this particular part of the discussion. But what I want to do is leave you all with the thought that what we are discussing is how do we have a country which values democracy and fraternity. Because democracy, of course, says that every person should have one vote, one value. But fraternity also means that we recognize the inherent differences among ourselves and not assume that anyone is superior to the other. And at the core of this is the idea of the dignity of the individual. So let's reframe this debate a little bit. Instead of putting a versus, let's put an and.
Mr. Ram, your views on that? Your views on should it be one person, one vote? Is there a better way of doing it?
I think this business of one person, which really means one citizen, one vote, one value, this comes from Dr. Ambedkar's last address to the Constituent Assembly on November 25th, before the Constitution was adopted, has been made much of. I think what he meant really was, it was in terms of social justice. And although the constitutional provision is pretty clear on how seats should be allocated, divided in the for the Lok Sabha among the states, there's no need to mix this up. One, mechanically to say that one vote, one value, meaning a certain demographic equality. That's my point. Now, the real political issue here is promoting and achieving all-round development and pursuing population control by whatever name called are stated key policy and governance objectives of every government from the time we had independent, free government, elected governments. So, given this, our states that do well, it's been talked about. This is part of the campaign in the South, going to be penalized for their success. So, contrary to what delimitation policy assumed, the performance gap in terms of achieving all-round development and bringing down the population growth rate, I think these two are organically tied together. This has widened. And there's a paper published in the, I can give you the citation, in the Economic and Political Weekly, published recently. It's called Comparative Macroeconomic Performance and Human Development of India's States. Does Convergence Remain Elusive? By Suchimita Bose and Somnath Chattopadhyay. they clearly say that convergence is not happening. And if it happens on the macroeconomic front, it's not happening on the human development indicators, and they have their own prescriptions and so on. But the point here is convergence is not happening. The gap is not narrowing, and it's well known that the southern states and also western states are far ahead of many of the Hindi-speaking states. Apart from the details that were quite interesting in the last session, there are surprises, don't overgeneralize, etc. The picture is pretty clear. And I would like to cite this book by Demography, it's titled Demography, Representation and Delimitation, The North-South Divide in India, written by Ravi K. Mishra, a historian, who is currently Deputy Director in the Prime Minister's Museum for Prime Ministers, used to be called Jawaharlal Nehru Museum and Library, anyway, in Tinmurti, where this data, it's worth looking at. I won't be dismissive, but he argues vehemently in favor of doing literally what the constitutional provisions demand. And his point is that demographic transition took place over a long period, specifically from 1881 to now, and the southern states had their great time of high population growth and so on. And it's very little to do with population control policies. That's, I think, that seems to fly in the face of all the data, everything that we know, and so on. This is the other side presented with a fairly militant demand that don't freeze the status quo, and so on. But I think Article 80 and also 170 use the term as far as practicable. The solution was there already in 1976, whatever context that was. But again, more interestingly, in 2001, that freeze it again. If you want to raise the number of seats in the Lok Sabha to 800 and something, 848, by all means do it, provided there's no physical, it's under the physical limit of being able to conduct the House meaningfully. But keep the existing ratio of seats if you want to raise it. There's another key issue here for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. It is clear that their share in the population has increased. And I think a separate provision has to be made for that in the interest of social justice. Since this matter is not justiciable, we need not look over us. If I'm not mistaken, the lawyers can correct it. We need not look over our shoulder at what the Supreme Court may want on this matter if somebody goes before it by way of challenge. So I think the only feasible solution is, if you don't, it may be too much to just freeze the existing number. So increase it by all means if you can accommodate them in this new house, new parliament, but keep the existing ratio, and that will solve the issue. One of the arguments by Dr. Mishra is that MPhil scheme, only 5 crore rupees a year. In the south, you can do a lot with it. In the north, its value is not very much because it's spread thin. I have no objection to your looking at that separately and increasing it for, according to states, in a realistic and reasonable way. But that's nothing to do with delimitation. So don't bring in all kinds of irrelevant or trivial issues into the argument. The point is, do you penalize states for doing better? And as the note that you sent, that was sent to me earlier, the background note points out, there are other constitutional values which also have to be taken into account in calculating delimitation, like constitutional morality, federalism or quasi-federalism, social justice, and welfare. States that do well have lived up to that constitutional imperative, whether it's in the directive principles of state policy or in the preamble to the constitution, that is relevant. So that's my solution. And the government has not shown its hand yet. I think it can be criticized severely for delaying the census of what should have been held in 2021. Maybe the pandemic meant a delay, but certainly it could have been held in time so that the next, you could put off the problem till 2031. It didn't do it for me, obviously political reasons, but it's not shown its hand yet. The Home Minister, Union Home Minister has said per capita, the states won't lose anything. Per capita in relation to what? Population or the existing number of seats. So they have to make that clear. I think that I don't think they've decided it yet.
Just what I was saying, the Constitution already does this to a certain extent of saying how democracy and fraternity can go together in the context of small states. So states which have a population of less than 6 million are existing one person, one vote, one value slightly tweaked so that they are not deprived entirely of representation. So you don't merge a Goa into Maharashtra or you don't merge a Sikkim into West Bengal. You say these are states with a particular history and a particular demography and a particular this thing, and you say they will be little bit overrepresented, right? It's not as if they're getting as many seats as Maharashtra or as West Bengal, but they will be little more overrepresented in the interest of fraternity.
Just one final, the caveat, as far as practicable, can be stretched to its maximum limit to accommodate all these factors or objectives.
Dr. Nanda.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me here. At the outset, I think Constitution has to work based on continuity and change. And Constitution also has to be a living document. Article 82 of the Constitution says readjustment after every census. Now the problem here is a lot of assumptions essentially based on ideological grounds. Had it been done periodically, now we have become selective that it wasn't done in 84th Amendment to the Constitution. So, but we've forgotten that it wasn't, it was also brought up in the 42nd Amendment to the Constitution. Now, whenever we introduce anything for the first time, or let's say after a gap, naturally there will be a resistance. That's where I was talking about continuity and change. If something is, let's say, even a disciplinary action, when it is done continuously, people just get used to it. Now, the problem here is multifolded. One, because of an apprehension that there's a union government with a different ideology and we are not comfortable with it. Secondly, we also seem to be quoting certain precedents associated with, let me give an example. In the previous session it was spoken about that, let's say, one nation and one election about, or the way some of the bills were passed and everything. There was an issue that was brought up on the procedures. Let's say because Constitution works on, or let's say the democracy itself is a procedural democracy. But debates and discussions has to be fair, where the people have to be educated on all the things. When it comes to the salaries of the public representatives, there seems to be no debate or discussion. Nobody speaks about the procedures of democracy. But when it comes to these issues, those also matter, this public money. When it comes to other issues, there seems to be an idea that there are not enough deliberations and others are happening. I can understand because of the precedences, because we can quote number of things. Facts have to be facts. Keeping that in mind, what I see is the two interventions in the past where 42nd and the 84th Amendment to the Constitution, where they halted it and have taken it forward without conducting it, has given a new precedence here in the era of different type of campaign, different type of communication, different type of access to information and everything. It has created this sort of a debate. Perhaps 30 years ago, I don't think there used to be discussions like this at civil society level. Maybe very, very selective intellectuals, because there used to be a hegemony over knowledge also with very few. Today, it can be. You say something, an individual sitting in the audience can go to Google and re-verify. I think that's the age we have come in. So there is more discussion that's coming in. So I see that the mistake that's done with not having a continuity is the one which is giving an apprehension here, which has to be a simple formula. We're not debating about when the number of seats are going to rise based on the population for the scheduled caste and the scheduled tribe. We see that one as a continuation that has to happen from the social justice perspective. But when it's population, there seems to be this thought coming in that some states deliberately produce more children. There seems like some of these states did not actually do enough. Now, how you can perhaps encourage people not to have children, but in a democracy you cannot stop them. Somebody tried that some time ago, right? Somebody forcefully tried that one. Even to have children, it's democracy. So how do I stop some states saying that, oh, no, you're not done enough, you have not stopped people to produce children? So there's an assumption that some of these states are eating, they're utilizing the funds, and then they're producing children. Now they have greater number, and that's indirectly in proportion is a punishment to the states that have performed well or perhaps had greater civic responsibility in terms of reducing the population to the country. So that's my submission here, that the continuity and change to make a constitution a living document has somewhere had its own hit, because of which suddenly there seems to be a hiccup that has come when the word delimitation has come into the public discourse. Thank you.
Interesting, Doctor. You raised this very interesting point that there should have been continuity. It should have happened in 71. Now, we have seen that while we say the Constitution is a living document and it needs to be evolving continuously, and which is seen through more than 100 plus amendments, we also see that political exigencies and opportunism sometimes makes us quote the founding fathers to reinforce a particular point, say this is how it should be. It's very selectively quoted. So, in this context, I would like to ask the panel your views on what are the legally tenable constitutional and statutory limits that can guide the Delimitation Commission's decisions. Mr. Alok.
So I think, and I urge everyone here to please do read my colleagues at Vidhi. They've written this report on states in parliament, which looks at what are the potential viable solutions within the constitutional and legal framework. Personally, I have also written a piece for EPW a few months ago, where I think the solution that I personally favor, and which is a mix of a lot of these concerns that we have reiterated, is do delimitation on the basis of the electorate. You're not denying anybody a vote. You're not saying a vote doesn't count. But this way, you account for the fact that there have been differential population growth, that some areas have seen more, say people get older, live longer. See, this is what we are forgetting. We're just assuming population means babies, but we are forgetting that population is also because people are living much longer. So in that way, people who are sort of living longer, they still get to influence all of this. And finally, it does not do violence to any principle in the Constitution. This is my biggest reason to favor this. You can sort of still ensure that there is, as far as possible, there is representation to the population, but you will ensure that the drop is not dramatic. And again, I go back to this point. Let's not make it about mathematics. Let's not make it about arithmetic. Because tomorrow that arithmetic logic can be turned on its head. Somebody will choose a number, somebody will choose a data point, somebody will choose a data set, which today might work for one state, tomorrow that same state will suffer because of it. And finally, I like the discourse to stop using the term punish. People vote, states don't vote. States don't choose MPs, it's individuals who choose MPs. It's not as if the state is going around calling people and saying, have you had children or not have had children. People are making these decisions themselves. And when we sort of say a state is being punished, we are conflating the people and the government. That's a very dangerous thing to do. Because in some senses, it again goes against this fundamental constitutional ideal that people, that individuals have dignity of their own and should be recognized for that. So, to that extent, I think it matters how we talk about it. Because as the moment we keep framing it as punishment, the moment we keep framing it as reward, democracy is not a reward. Democracy, the right to vote, comes from your fundamental dignity as an individual. The Constitution recognizes that. So when we stop speaking in these terms, we will more likely find an acceptable solution rather than getting caught in the punishment, reward, punishment, democracy this, democracy that. I think this, what I proposed, and which is proposed by authors Durai Rajan and his co-author in the EPW, they show by the numbers how it will lead to reallocation. Tamil Nadu may get a fewer seats, but what it will not do is fundamentally drop the representation so deep that it's a shock. I think the point that Dr. Kishor made is very valid. The mistake was 1976. 1981, it should have happened. Because if it had happened steadily, it would have allowed for a gradual realignment rather than a shock. Right? It's to use my own example, if I'd spent a lot of years actually working out, I wouldn't have to get shocked by the doctor's bill when I go to the, for a checkup. Like, that is what we're facing. That doesn't mean that you should do anything, that we should deny that there is something wrong. We should find a way to get back on track. And I think a way where we allocate seats based on the number of electors, essentially people aged 18 and above, is, I think, an acceptable solution.
I basically disagree with both panelists on this. It's not just a South-North divide. Okay, if you don't like the word punish, penalize, etc., use the word losing out. That losing out for doing well by the people. Don't forget, it's not just GDP and so on. We are talking about education, we are talking about health, we are talking about access to basic needs. And the state provides us, the midday meal scheme, for example, to start, and all that's come after that. So, and I'll also use the word states. Individuals, of course, but individuals don't, states are real, it's not fiction. Political parties rule states. In this state, it's been basically one or the other party from 1967, either the DMK or the AIDMK after the split. And therefore, it is meaningful to talk about states. Yes, states don't vote in toto, but states matter in the Lok Sabha, the way states vote. So I think the demand made by the elected representatives as well as those in opposition, in particular states, take Kerala for example, or Tamil Nadu, or Telangana, or even Andhra Pradesh possibly, will matter. And it's not just the South, it applies to other states, Punjab, Orissa, and so on. The principle is important. These two are clearly in conflict. I would use the word versus, yes, deliberately. These two are clearly in conflict. What the constitutional provision says in a literal reading, what it requires. And as for continuity, don't forget, maybe the communication, the media ecosystem, the communication ecosystem has changed, has been transformed in a revolutionary way. Yes, I concede that. But there has been a continuity of decisions on delimitation. 1976, 2001. 1976 for another reason, when we are under a dictatorship. But in 2001, why did Prime Minister Vajpayee and his government decide? Yes, he was in a coalition. There were competing demands. There had been trouble on this. So the continuity is with that reading of the Constitution, and you and Vinod used the word political pragmatism. I think that's very relevant here. So it was a statesmanly decision made. Maybe he felt he had no choice. He could have pushed it through, possibly. But I think it was a far-sighted decision, and the continuity is with not doing what the Constitution requires you literally to do, and use the caveat as far as practicable in a sagacious way, so that you keep people united, largely united on this issue. Who's demanding that one vote, one value means I must represent, my representative must be for fewer people? Who thinks like that? Which individual thinks like that? It comes from politics, it comes from ideology, it comes from large numbers of politicians in a state demanding it, or a region. So I think I completely disagree with this idea that continuity here means, do what is required in by the constitutional provision with and don't use the caveat. Anyway, I'm not a lawyer, but I think I certainly have followed politics, and it is a recipe for trouble if you're going to go through with it. The government does not shown its hand, and let's see how statesmanly or sagacious they will be.
Thank you. On a lighter note, I was mentally prepared to be said that we don't agree. That was expected from him, being a journalist. Nevertheless, invariably, if you observed the previous discussion in the previous panel, it came back and forth to devolution, it came back and forth to finances, and though it starts off with the number of member of parliament, that doesn't rise the finances for the respective states in the federal structure. Now, what is interesting here is, so if finance is a concern, if performance is a concern, if let's say your effort to make sure that the population has been kept under check is a concern, or if you have anything else, actually there are better formulations rather than fighting over losing the number of seats, which has to be happening based on what has been given as some sort of formula. Now, one of the formula that is available is Gadgil-Mukherjee formula. It's working. So the Gadgil this thing came in with the early part of the planning commission, and then subsequently that was essentially to look at important components such as let's say literacy, health indices, and also welfare coverage. Then it was thought in 1991 when Pranab Mukherjee was there that few more things have to be also brought in. That includes the performance incentive that was also practiced along with let's say the budget allocations that were done based on the population. Apart from that, we also had service level benchmarks and many other things. I happened to work then with the Minister of Urban Development and Housing and Poverty Alleviation. We used to have this special incentive that was given to states whenever they perform for these type of things. Now, using Gadgil-Mukherjee formula, they speak about and say that the criteria and the weightage, if you look in, population according to the census would be 60%, per capita income would be 25%, performance, that is tax effort and the fiscal management, would be 7.5%, and then the special problem that includes the natural disaster, insurgency, and many other things, which was brought out very clearly by the public representative in the previous session, would cover and take care of the 100% here. So what I see is that though the thought is on the number of seats that are going to be reduced in the House of Representatives, or what we call as the Lok Sabha, but what I see at the end of the day, it's boiling down to is my finances, the amount of money that I'm contributing to, and in returns what I'm getting to. So I think on a positive note, rather than touching that part, again, it's all very early for us to, because so far nothing has been spoken over, because a lot of them are apprehensions and assumptions as well. So I see this is one way of looking at that. The possibility is that let the process happen, but you take care of it something else, and you take care of, because that's the money that you are in requirement of. That's exactly what you're asking, and you're saying you've been punished, or the terminology punished is being used for your performance, and that performance is not how many member of parliaments you have produced, rather than about the money that you have generated and what in return you are getting. So from a positive perspective, I see this as a possibility. That's Gadgil-Mukherjee formula is a possibility.
Very interesting perspectives. Alok was of the opinion that we should follow the constitutional mandate, go in for delimitation. Mr. Enram said there must be continuity. So my question is, are there any legal challenges if the government decides not to do anything and the 2026 deadline passes? Then we will have, instead of the 71 census, the 2011 census, which was last published. So will that create any legal challenges? Hello.
Two big ones. One is women's reservation. I think, actually, it won't be so much of a challenge. If you are doing a delimitation exercise, you can still do the women's reservation. That's not a problem. The one challenge is, I think, something which Mr. Ram also flagged, which is the representation of scheduled castes and scheduled tribes in the Lok Sabha. Because Tamil Nadu has a certain percentage of scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. The population is much greater in UP and Bihar. If you are reducing or rather, if the disproportionately less representation is there for people from UP and Bihar, likewise the proportion of scheduled castes and scheduled tribes represented in parliament reduces. This is a point, if you recall, 2 discussions ago I had mentioned. This will be a challenge because I cannot see it's still using a data point which is 15 years old. By the time of the next census, maybe 30 years old. So we will just keep kicking the can. And I think, to me, the real challenge of this exercise is that it's not taking into account a certain change in India's reality. And I'll bring that reality here, which is, for a long time, people around the world used to wonder, why don't Indians move? Indians were by far the most likeliest of people to live, to be born somewhere, work there and die there. Migration within the country, and we think it's large because we hear the stories, but the actual numbers, check in the 2011 census also, migration within the country was a tiny percentage of the population. That is changing now. That is changing now. We don't have the numbers because there was no census, no projections. But we know, we have lived through a reality. We saw the people walking on the streets during COVID. We saw how our cities emptied out. Last panel also somebody mentioned how Tamil Nadu's industrial hubs depend on labor coming from Jharkhand, Orissa and Bihar. We know that migration is a reality. And that migration is a reality because of the enormous differences in wealth. Number was given in the previous session, but economists have framed it in a slightly different way. They call it the 333 problem. I call it the 533 problem or the 335 problem. India's 3 richest states are now 5 times as richer as India's 3 poorest states. That means the average person living in a Tamil Nadu, Karnataka or Gujarat is almost 5 times richer than the average person living in Uttar Pradesh or Bihar. Uttar Pradesh's numbers, I think, get a little inflated thanks to the NCR region. Ghaziabad and Noida and Greater Noida are huge economic hubs. If you see within Uttar Pradesh, the average person in Noida is nearly 20 times richer than the average person living in Eastern UP. We have to acknowledge this massive gulf inequality. And that is going to have an effect because if we reinforce the current, and I say this with all seriousness, there is a political inequality today. If we reinforce political inequality and say we are not going to reflect it, there is going to be a massive shift in population. People are going to say that, look, the numbers sound huge when you look at it on the budget document, but per capita, Tamil Nadu spends maybe 2 or 3 times more than Uttar Pradesh on each person in Tamil Nadu, right? They are going to be, I don't have education, I don't have jobs, I don't have healthcare, I can move freely within the country because that's my fundamental right. Are we willing to deal with the consequences of the massive social rupture that can take place? Look, legal constitution is all solutions to a problem. You should not create a new problem using the law and the constitution. And that is the bigger worry for me. To me, the constitution is a framework for finding solution, not to say we'll avoid seeing the reality.
Do you have any thoughts on that, sir?
Sir, I want to ask you, is it justiciable?
Yeah, I think, see, and this is my point that, we don't give politicians enough credit sometimes to find solutions to problems. We shouldn't look to courts. I say this in a law firm, sitting with lawyers. This is a solution which needs the politicians to be serious about what they're talking about, what they're facing, and find a solution within the constitutional framework, find a solution within the legal framework, which says, yes, we know this change is coming, yes, this change has to be addressed. We have to ensure that economic inequality is not going to be reinforced by political inequality, and that the security and the internal security of the country is not fundamentally ruptured. I think That is how we need to think about it.
Can we discuss political inequality? What does it mean?
Okay. Just before I come to political inequality, 2011 is a little difficult because Tamil Nadu's population in 11 was 72.15 million. By 24, it is 83.70. Whereas with regard to Uttar Pradesh, in 2011, it was 199.81. Now it's 244.0. So there's huge disparity, as he mentions, that the aspirations of the people will go, or it will be underrepresented. And I think that aspiration, you cannot stop it. I think with the availability of public interest litigations and many other components that are available, I think there will be legal challenges as well, because people will make it an issue saying that what constraints, because the government cannot say just not to rupture anybody. I would want to just go with the numbers that are existing, make everyone happy, let Tamil Nadu be happy, let Kerala be happy, let Maharashtra also be happy, let Uttar Pradesh also be happy. We will also postpone this by unprecedentedly, maybe let's say another 30 years, so that everybody is happy. Now perhaps that position can be taken, but I think somebody will question that what are the constraints actually the union government is facing, that it's not actually going for the delimitation. Then the government is bound to answer. And then public representatives, because education is two-way. I also agree with the point that I think we are not investing enough in the intelligence of our lawmakers. I think somewhere we have left partially that to the court of law, and then we have also left it to few experts. I think our public policy makers are quite educated, and they have a sense of what it has to be. They can collectively come up with something. I think we are not putting or investing enough, because Constitution is a guiding book, but you need not actually go by. So we have done a number of things with regard to that. Let's look at the LGBTQ, right? There's no mention of that in the Constitution, but we have made sure that we have made amendments, we have made provisions for that, and this state itself has gone one step ahead, and few days ago recruited a transgender as a faculty in one of the colleges. So I think the guiding light is the Constitution, but I think it should not constrain us to go forward. I think then we will perhaps take this forward. I think that.
Yeah, political inequality. If the value of one vote in Tamil Nadu today is 1, per the 2011 census, and the numbers may change, the value of a vote in Bihar was 0.7. Now that value has been falling. It's not, a day is not very far when the value of a vote in Bihar is 0.5. That fundamentally, I mean, I can accept a 0.9, a 1.1 the Constitution, and that is where the point about as far as practical happens. I'll give you an example from Bangalore, and I'm sure it's true in Chennai also. Rajarajeshwari Nagara, which is a constituency on the edge of Bangalore, in 2008 when they did the delimitation, had 2 lakh voters. Today it has 6.5 lakh voters. In central Bangalore, constituency of, no, I'm talking about assembly constituencies. Assembly constituencies, Jayanagar had about 2 lakh voters, now it has about 1.7. You are getting within one city, right? I'm giving you a micro level of the problem. This is happening nationwide. Also, within one city, if you live in, and Jayanagar is a very nice part of the town, let me be very honest, your vote is 4 times the weight of somebody living in Rajarajeshwari Nagara. And this has happened because of migration. No one's pushing anyone out. This is not birth rates, this is not population planning, nothing. This is simply a reality we are refusing to acknowledge, that in Bangalore, the population has changed so dramatically, the dynamics have changed so dramatically, that we are continuing to use outdated numbers to allocate political power, and that has created its own perverse situation where we are unable to vote out MLAs in Bangalore. I'm sorry, that's the unfortunate truth. Irrespective of parties, Bangalore MLAs always win. And when the rest of the state sees this churn in political parties, we in Bangalore are stuck. So in some ways, this is the reality that I'm coming from, that there is an unhappy status quo that today is going to get worse and worse if we try and avoid this difficult but necessary discussion.
Yeah, I don't get this meaning meaning of value of a vote. And when Dr. Ambedkar clearly didn't mean that in terms of the value goes down because you represent fewer people or more people, goes up because you represent, if you represent more people, it goes down. If you represent fewer people, it goes up. For me, it is not a very relevant indicator of this. That has to be reinterpreted in terms. What it means is everyone is equal. And he said it also in another context when he talked about in society, in socio-economic life, we don't have that. Of course, we're not discussing Dr. Ambedkar's statement here, but that's often used. I agree with Dr. Nanda Kishor that this it's a guiding document. So try to interpret it for the best of your country or society, your people. So we don't have to. It's not a big deal saying that the value interpreted in this sense has to be more or less the same across the country. I think underlying all this was the hope that inequalities would come down, regional inequalities, differences among states in every respect. It does not happen. In the United States, I read, I think they have not increased the number of seats in the House of Representatives after 1913. But some adjustments have taken place. States have not lost very much, which means, there's largely congruence among those states. But we are a developing society where these inequalities, convergence is not happening across the country, across regions, which is why they speak about the North-South divide. So I think a good solution would be to have a good discussion with the parties and keep the existing ratio for now, and not bother about how, the value of your vote goes down. Then you have to go into every constituency and look at that within a state. It's a waste of time and resources to get hung up on this aspect of the exercise. Delimitation can take place. You've got to address the issue of scheduled castes, scheduled tribes in the interest of social justice, which is a constitutional value. But otherwise, take the larger interest of Indian politics, the Indian nation into account, and try to avoid trouble over this issue. That's my hope. That's what many of us share. I'm sure our panelists are the same thing. They have different prescriptions. But don't let this cloud people's choice over the next several years, whether it's assembly elections or the next Lok Sabha election, and so on. Somebody mentioned the Rajya Sabha. States don't have equal representation in the Rajya Sabha. That's the US Senate. I think they got mixed up in the last panel session, whoever mentioned it.
I think they were proposing it as a solution. The Carnegie paper, which was referred to, they were proposing an equal representation in the Rajya Sabha as a potential solution to ensure no state feels left out in the Lok Sabha. But quite honestly, I thought about it. I initially liked the idea, but it cannot work because we have a parliamentary system of government where the Prime Minister is elected by the Lok Sabha. In the US, it works for both houses to be equal because the president is elected completely differently. It doesn't matter if they have a majority in the one house or the other. But we'll create a new problem completely with the idea of money bills.
Senators are directly elected.
And senators, of course, are directly elected. So I like the appeal of the idea that if we just equalize states in the Rajya Sabha, we'll solve the problem. But I think there are about 4 or 5 new problems which crop up, which requires a very fundamental retooling of our idea of parliamentary democracy, which I'm not so sure states are ready for.
I think it's true with that idea of making equal number. If you look at the United States Constitution itself, The revenue bills are always generated in the lower house itself. It can only suggest amendments in the Senate. That's the case. That's the case even with the initiation to impeachment has to happen in the lower house only. Then the Senate can take forward and impeach. So it is not going to make a big difference when it comes to these issues, and also the things are very common there here, except the election mode and many other things that are associated with, and also some other vested parts. But what I also see is that just for a spin, how would the people in the northern part of the country would be debating delimitation? If you look in, that would be a very interesting way to assess something, because this matters to us. That's why we're discussing here. But we can also look at from their perspective and what they would be thinking of the very idea of the growth, very idea of that we are contributing to GDP, the very idea of saying that we have got money. I'm 100% sure they will also be telling if a particular state has shown this percentage of growth with having, let's say, raw materials such as iron, from where did the iron come? From where did the coal come? That would be very interesting, because there is a very interesting data that's associated with freight equalization scheme between 1952 to 1992. If you look in, it will spin other way around. I think it will be very interesting discussion as well. I'll stop it here.
Very interesting. I was going to bring that up, but before we come to freight equalization policy, we did speak about the value of a vote. 1:1, 1:0.4, 0.5. Is it relevant, not relevant, things like that. And so there was also a suggestion on the panel that we should let status quo continue or proportionately increase it and leave it there. I would like to bring to the attention of the panel that we have Article 330, which deals with the reservation for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. And the founding fathers, in their wisdom, said that we should have this reservation for up to 50 years from 1950. So it would come to an end by 2020. Then we had it further extended, and now it is up to 2030.
Now it is for eternity. Nobody will dare take it away.
There is a new development recently where they said that the census will also now enumerate the caste. So there will also be a caste census. We already have a 10% reservation for economically weaker section. Supreme Court said that 50% reservation is the upper limit. This 10% does not come within that, so we have approximately 60% reservation.
Tamil Nadu has a higher.
Tamil Nadu historically has had 69%. And now there are demands in some states, to have reservation for minorities. So when we are looking at the caste census and we are looking at reservation demands for for other backward classes, most backward classes and things like that, we already have a 60% all India limit, we have a 69% state limit. How far can these reservations legally go? How will delimitation impact this whole concept? Your thoughts?
So more than delimitation, I think a caste census, so I literally wrote about this last month. What it might do is redefine our idea of socially and educationally backward classes. I'll again make a reference a little bit to Karnataka's history. We've all read the S.R. Bommai versus Union of India judgment, landmark judgment, which upheld it sort of limited the powers of the governor. But what was the context for that case? The context for that case was actually an attempt by the Karnataka government to rationalize reservations. They set up the Justice Venkataswamy Commission, which said that the two most dominant castes in the state, the Vokkaligas and the Lingayats, are no longer socially and educationally backward. They should not be eligible for reservations. Unfortunately, this also meant that no government was willing to accept this. They said we are too dependent on the support from these communities. We cannot accept these recommendations. This is, and again, on various grounds. The report is fairly robust and on various grounds. Now we are seeing the counter happen, where a Maratha community or a Jat community comes to the court says, nope, you're not entitled to reservation. Could the data from the caste census make the government revisit the list, whether at the union level or at the state level? Or if the government doesn't do it, could the court revisit that list? There is a very fundamental change which is coming if the caste census is brought up. I think the second change which might come in is we might see a demand for inter-se reservations among SC and ST communities, because what the Supreme Court has held, and that's also what I wrote about, Supreme Court has held in that Jarnail Singh case, that it's not, the list is of course centrally created, but who gets benefit to what extent is up to the state to decide and the center to decide, based on rational criteria and so on. We know that this, when the census collects subcaste data, what it doesn't collect is data as to which subcastes have done better than others, more represented and less represented. We might see, again, this is speculation looking into the future, that what has happened in the context of jobs and education, we might see a demand coming up saying that politically numerous castes, and I'll give an example from a neighboring state, it is Andhra Pradesh. The Madhika community always say that we don't get the benefit of reservation because we are too, within scheduled castes, very backward. They might say even political reservations, which so far nobody has ever made a demand. They might say we are numerous and we don't get representation, so even the reservations within SC and ST, there should be further reservations. So I foresee that there could be this is the impact that I could foresee on reservation. But the last point I'll end with and leave is this. Political reservations, the numbers are more or less fixed. We know up 100, down, may go somewhere across the country. The real issue is state governments are not recruiting people anymore. Recruitments have fallen off. States are not starting new universities. Maybe a fight over reservations is a fight over a very rapidly shrinking pie. If the ultimate goal is social justice, and it's always been social justice, reservation is one tool, it may prompt a rethink on whether reservations are enough for social justice. So I'll leave it at that thought.
Would you like to speak anything about? Please go ahead.
Yeah, I think what I thought was that it will further create greater amount of burden on the states also. See, one of the common factor, whether we agree or not, all said and done, as much we criticize people in the public sector or the government sector, at the end of the day, people want a job in the government sector. That means the expectation from the respective state governments is very high in terms of creation of jobs. Now, is the state capable of doing that one, or would it actually do that one is also a question. Because if we take the data across the country, I think Orissa is the only state where regularly teachers' appointments have happened at all levels. No other state has followed this one. Most of the progressive states have not been able to follow this one because of various reasons. It might be. It might be because they've gone ahead and up till the recruitment, or they've had entrance exams or a competitive exam, but somebody then moved the court of law on a particular issue and then they bought a stay. It might have been hundreds of issues. Whatever said and done, Orissa is the only state perhaps that has regularly done, and they've taken care of that part. Now, when this is going to be a burden on the states also have to think about that. Will it stop at the level of education, right? I think from the social benefit perspective, from the education perspective, from many other perspectives. Now, that's where I see that there is this new, let's say, demand or a new dialogue that's coming up asking for reservations in the private sector as well, in the IT sector to everything. Now, I think that's the spillover effect that I see that's going to happen, and it will also create some sort of a rupture, and it will certainly disturb. So I think this whole idea of whether we want or not, at the end of the day, though it is meant for social benefit, will create political ruptures as well. That's my take.
What is the question?
The question is, Article 330 speaks about reservation for scheduled caste and scheduled tribe. The reservations were supposed to come to an end in 2020. It is now pushed to 2030. Alok said it's now almost permanent. Or rather, I think you, sir, said it was almost permanent. Now we are speaking about caste census coming in the next census. We already have 50% cap by the Supreme Court on all reservation. 10% reservation for economically weaker section is outside the purview of this 50%. And now with the caste reservation coming in, caste census coming in, will there be more reservations? The women's reservation is linked to the delimitation. So how do you see this panning out, sir?
So far as reservation policies are concerned, and experience, Tamil Nadu, I think, is the state that should be studied deeply. And there's some data showing that it is this that has built up the foundation for growth, takeoff, and so on. That caste inequalities were reduced, and they even opened up opportunities for entrepreneurs and so on. This book called The Dravidian Model presents data on that, whether you fully agree with their findings or not. There's a lot of data there. So Tamil Nadu has done very well in reducing caste inequalities so far as the backward, what are called designated the backward classes are concerned. It is arguable whether it has done very well so far as scheduled castes and scheduled tribes are concerned. In fact, probably not. There are divides. In the past, at least, there have been clashes and so on. I think the same benefits have not gone to the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. And of course, the reservation is going to continue. I think very few people are going to have any doubts about it for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. But whether there's more space for accommodating new sections which may figure in the caste census, I don't know. I don't know how they study socioeconomic, backwardness. The Constitution uses the word socioeconomic, socially, economically backward classes, and socially and educationally backward classes, which is why under Chief Minister Karunanidhi, I think, introduced this most backward within the backward. So I think there's a lot to be studied here. But separately, in any kind of delimitation exercise, you have to take that, you cannot avoid that issue. The representation for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes in the Lok Sabha and also in state assemblies. I think you have to, that is certainly going to increase. There will be a demand. I think that will, and it will be quite just that it does it.
It is built into the constitution. It says, which Professor Nanda Kumar brought out, Nanda Kishor. For many of us, many of the younger generation, in the last 30 years especially, you may not know, but there was a policy between 1952 and 1992 called the Freight Equalization Policy, where raw material from the resource-rich states like Bihar, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, those areas could be available to the southern states, which are far, far away from those production centers, at the same price at which it is available locally.
Which means a huge subsidy.
Which means the southern states for 40 years were hugely subsidized. And that gave rise to initial economic development, which then snowballed into more development, more education institutions, more industries, more IT parks, and so on. So when we speak about delimitation, a very frequently put forth argument is the southern states are being punished for population control. And in that context, the southern states did get an artificial cost advantage of setting up industries from raw materials which are far away. And so in that context, we also in the earlier session, we spoke about the 15th Pay Commission and how they are giving high weightage to low per capita income states to lift up the poor states. So in this context, what, in your opinion, the question is, what are the safeguards that exist within the Constitution to ensure that smaller or socio-economically advanced states are not politically sidelined? Alok, would you like to?
I think we should not minimize the powers already given in the Constitution to states. A state like, a really small state like Nagaland which is heavily dependent on transfers by the union, can make laws on as many subjects as Kerala or Tamil Nadu, which are a lot more independent in their fiscal space. Those protections exist. And I think the GST, the council, is a very interesting constitutional innovation, where for the first time the state and the center are sitting together to make tax policy, unthought of. And it's a good measure. I do have some problems with some of the specific constitutional provisions, but we leave that aside for the moment. It's a question that fundamentally to me comes from an imagination of what federalism should be. I think in our imagination of federalism, we are still okay with, they decided like this in 1950, so it's perfectly fine. If you actually think about it, a lot of the innovations in federalism that have taken place have been a result of politics. It has been the result of regionalist parties saying we want more power, we want it to be exercised this way, we want it to be done this way, and that's right. I think we should push this conversation forward, and I was thinking about it when it was being discussed in the previous panel. Why can't we rewrite the lists? Let's take a lot of subjects out of list 1 and give it to the states in list 2. Let's take more subjects out of list 3 and put it in list 2. And let's also give more powers to local government. And I think the problem was being mentioned by the MLA from Thousand Lights. The reason why people expect their MPs to fix their drains is because there is no councillor most of the time. If I'm not mistaken, Chennai went without elections for about 6 years. No local body elections. It has now been 4 years since Bangalore has had an elected set of councillors and corporators. Who will we go to? We'll go to our MLA. If the MLA is busy, we go to the MP. We're being forced to this. No one likes to stand in a long queue outside the MLA's who's dealing with thousands of other problems. I'd rather go to my corporator, my ward member who's practically next door. This is a problem which has been created, I think, unfortunately, because states have not taken the 73rd and 74th Amendment seriously. States cannot say more autonomy, more autonomy, more autonomy on one hand and deny the same autonomy to local self-government. Because local self-government is what fixes all our problems on a day-to-day basis. So if we are serious about saying more autonomy, more power, set the example. Say that we will ensure no matter what happens, elections will take place to every Zilla Panchayat, every urban local body every 5 years. They will be empowered to solve every single problem in your day-to-day life. They will have tax raising capacity. They will not be dependent on the state government for handouts. And they will actually function like a
Kerala does that.
Exactly. I was just going to come to that. Kerala is a fantastic model for that. And I think it reflects in Kerala's improvement overall because people know my ward member will solve my problem, right? So I think this is where, we should push this part of the conversation forward, not just say that let's just defend whatever powers have been given in the constitution because it's the best. It's not the best possible arrangement of powers. Why shouldn't the states levy and collect income tax? Why should it have to be devolved? Let it go up. Let states collect and give a share to the union. Why not? I think we have to be bold about this imagination. And I think we need to re-envision what we see as the structure of government in India, not just make it about center-state relations.
I think the first thing to be taken off union list is education. I mean, concurrent list is education.
Professor Thakur, we are having a lot of inputs for our white paper which is proposed. Before I open the question and answer session, would you like to say anything, Professor?
Yeah.
Chatham House rules or no?
On the particular issue that was raised on the subsidies to many other things, it actually incentivized some of those states in the northern states to have mines and other things for a very long time. So we have taken advantage of having, let's say, major R&D and defense infrastructure, includes ISRO, HAL, DRDO, you name one. We have had nuclear installations in Kalpakkam, we have had R&D in Hyderabad. Apart from that, we also have had some of the, absolutely, like let's say the union supported policies between 1990 to 2000 prioritized Hyderabad, Bangalore and Chennai for ACCs and IT corridor development. Now these are the ones which became magnets for FDI, talent and export-linked industries as well. Now these are all very, very important components that come in. Now the question is also that how do we make our, let's say, public representatives more representing? That's the question. Because we started off when Sukumar Sen was the first election commissioner. Prime Minister was anxious actually. He wanted to have election because he wanted validation, because he was running a government without an election. So he wanted public acceptance and he wanted validation. But he had spine, Sukumar Sen, to just walk up to the Prime Minister and say that I cannot have an election where the woman's name is mentioned as wife of so-and-so or daughter of so-and-so. So I will take time, sir, but I will get this done. So India is run based on institution, even from a democratic perspective. If you look of the South Asian states, which plus or minus have taken in less than a decade or so from when we have had our independence, India is able to do something, may not be as desired, but I think we are decent enough and we are going ahead with that one because of the institutions that we have built. I think building institutions is important, like procedures are also important, but procedures cannot be based on, let's say, selective nature. It has to be equally, applicable to all levels. So it has to be that the states cannot decide, that point also came in the previous, session, that the states have also played their own role when they have called for early elections. You cannot blame it that only the misuse of a particular article has led to the disruption of the elections at the state level. The states have done this one. For example, the state of Andhra Pradesh, there was an artificially created crisis at Alipiri, and then an early election was called. Now who's responsible for this one? Who pays for it? You were elected to complete a term. So don't the public representative have the responsibility to the public? I think this is where the public education has to come in. Antonio Gramsci, one of the famous neo-Marxists, says that in a society, I may cook every now and then an egg or something else. That doesn't make me a chef. So that means we have decided that in a society that not all of us will be directly responsible and be there to take care of the policy process. That's why we have public representatives. We have elected them to go and do something for us, and I think there is greater responsibility of them that they cannot shy away. So that has to be strengthened at the civic level, and then perhaps the discourse will change in this country. That's my take. Thank you.
I just want on Sukumar Sen, I think he did a fantastic job. There's a literature on it, but unfortunately 2.8 million women who would not give their own names, but would say wife of so-and-so or daughter of so-and-so, were missed out. And I think Sukumar Sen or the system could have used more imagination to solve that problem. And then you had the problem of missing women voters after that in a number of elections. But hats off to Sukumar Sen, the hero. But I think in this case, slight disagreement there. I think he exercised his independence for the wrong reason, brought about a wrong outcome, because 2.8 million women who are clearly citizens out of the 80 million eligible voters, because I've looked into this, I've written on this, missed out, whereas a more imaginative solution could be found. You could verify that person is actually there. Just because you didn't get the name, you are barred from voting. Argue.
Yes, the democracy is run by its institutions. We had a wonderful session. I would like to the audience to take this opportunity to ask a few questions, to get insightful answers. Restrict yourself to questions, not observations or comments. We are running out of time. Legal and constitutional dimensions of delimitation on those lines.
No, don't expect questions. There will always be opinions on this issue.
Hi, thank you. So both panels sort of hinted towards the fact that there could be more solutions to not just whatever problem that may be created because of delimitation exercise. There are better ways to address the problem than just stopping the exercise, right? And Mr. Ram sort of mentioned that, I don't know which individual thinks that one person means one vote, right? Our constitution makers definitely thought so, and it is there in the constitution, which because of that, the principle arises. But he did not sort of, I just would like him to mention if, what does he think one person, one vote means? And because when the delimitation exercise was freezed, and when the freeze was continued, those exercises were also political. It's not that they were not a political decision. And whatever happens, whether you not go ahead with the exercise or whether you do it, it will have a political element in it, right? And the solution is not to avoid the problem, but to address it, right? So I'm just thinking on that point, right? When Mr. Ram says that I don't know what one person, one vote means. I did not get a clear answer on what he thinks it means. He did sort of circle around that code, but did not clearly sort of give a clear idea as to what does that mean, if not what others have been saying. That's all.
You want me to respond to that?
He's asked the question.
Yeah. No, I think who thinks in terms of how many people does my MLA or MP represent? Who thinks like that? And who feels diminished because of the vote value is less, that my vote is valued less than the vote of somebody is valued more if you're in Tamil Nadu than in somebody in Bihar and so on. But who thinks like that? Isn't that an artificial construct? Or if you don't want to use the artificial, isn't that a construct on another level? Who thinks like that? Who feels dissatisfied or outraged in Uttar Pradesh or Bihar that in Tamil Nadu his vote value is higher than my vote value here? What does vote value mean? It's an artificial, or it is a construct at another level that there are so many representatives for this size of population, and it's very uneven across the country. Only politicians think like that.
I just very quickly add to that. People may not think it, but they're acting on it. And when I say acting on it, if you actually look at the turnout of every constituency across this country and map it for the last few years, it's almost a very neat correlation between size of constituency and turnout. Rural Bihar has the same turnout as urban Bangalore or Chennai. So it's not, this is the myth that I want to bust. It's not that people in urban areas are disengaged from politics. In fact, a lot of people do want to vote, they would like to vote. What is putting them off is that no party is making an effort to reach out to them. It's the same process which is happening in rural Bihar. You will see 48, 49, 50, 54, 55% in Lok Sabha elections, right? In assembly, it's slightly different because that was delimitation was done on a different basis for that. But if you actually see, the larger the constituency, the lower the turnout. Which means what? Which means the politician is thinking at some level, their votes don't matter. And that person is feeling if the politician doesn't want to come and make an effort to get my vote, for me, voting is a cost. If you're a person, you have to take a day off. It may be a if there's a effort, but to go and get that vote done. So you need to see what am I getting for this, and devalued because constituency is so big, your vote actually doesn't matter. So this is something which unfortunately isn't as well studied, but a basic correlation will show larger the constituency size, less the turnout.
The other aspect is urban-rural. Right across India, the value of a vote, to borrow that construct for a minute, is much higher for a rural voter than it is for an urban voter. Huge difference in this. Even though the majority of people live in the countryside, some states are, getting closer to 50%, Tamil Nadu, for example. But so the rural voter has a huge advantage. Are you going to get aggrieved over that? If you use this indicator, value of a vote, who thinks like that? What he said is relevant. I haven't thought about it. Turnout.
Good evening, SCM panelists. I'm Ashwat Pinakarin, a penultimate year student at School of Excellence in Law. I guess you've already discussed Article 330 and Article 333, but as a law student, I can't help but focus on Article 329A, which specifically restricts courts or bars interference of courts when it comes to delimitation commission's orders.
That's what I was asking, justiciability.
Exactly. To add to that, I guess the Supreme Court has already clarified its position quite a long ago on Meghraj Kothari. But however, in the recent times, Justice Suryakant's division bench interpreted Meghraj Kothari in a way that indeed delimitation commission's orders are subjected to judicial review if it's manifestly arbitrary. So I'd appreciate the panel's view on where you think judicial review should stand when it comes to delimitation commission's orders.
Can I just use that mic because this is sorry. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. There are two ways to look at it. One is Justice Suryakant is so far out of the mainstream judicial view on this that it was a passing observation. I know which order you're referring to. To me, I read it as a passing observation. But I look at the history of the expansion of judicial review in this country. Initially, the court said our orders under Article 356 cannot be reviewed. They are now being reviewed. The court initially said money bills cannot be touched. Now they are on the verge of being touched and changed. We sort of have, in fact, even in the context of speaker's powers for disqualification, which was considered sacrosanct, now courts have said we will set aside if it is. So I personally feel it depends on how badly the Delimitation Commission does its job. Because we saw, even recently, yes, a lot of people are unhappy with the Jammu and Kashmir and Assam delimitation. Courts did not interfere. Because yes, there were controversial changes, admittedly, but the court didn't know what to do. It's not like the court can read, unlike in the US, where courts have the powers to redraw the boundaries themselves, Indian courts, A, no law gives them that power, and B, even if they gave that power, we have not evolved our procedure to be able to assist courts in redrawing boundaries. So I think if a Delimitation Commission does its job sufficiently badly, a court may be tempted to step in, but I see that as a very remote possibility. Because it is not, and it's not as if the Constitution is making it non-justiciable. The subject matter itself is non-justiciable. How do I mean, as a judge, know where to draw the boundaries of Thousand Lakes constituency, which then MLA was from? I don't. Do I know, should it go to this ward? Should it include that ward? Should it include this part of Chennai? Should it not include that part of Chennai? But I do know if the sitting MLA is sitting and drawing the boundary and telling the Delimitation Commission, put it here, put it here, put it here, I should strike it down, right? So to that extent, it may be possible, but I think something with, it's basic malafide, it's basic bias. But it's not as if the court can say, we will now tell you how to draw, right? So I think it's possible, courts will slowly expand, but it will have to require the Delimitation Commission to doing such a bad job that the court in good conscience cannot say, please go ahead.
I think it will also reflect badly on the judiciary itself because it will be headed by a former Supreme Court justice. So there ends the story.
Good evening to the distinguished panelists. As a very lay person, as a citizen, there are two basic questions. First of all, I'd like to congratulate Dr. Vinod Surana to have organized such a forum of such distinguished panel. There's a lot of light as a lay person that I have gained and knowledge that I've gained on this subject. But as a very lay person, as a citizen who would like to vote, there is one question that always bothers me is, does this exercise or will this exercise really account for the huge migrating population? Will this address concerns of migrating population? As regards, say, caste or other regional preferences are concerned. If you look at most of the so-called backward states in North India, where most of the working population is already migrated, how relevant would those regional preferences be in terms of deciding what the equation for delimitation or what the selection criteria for delimitation would be? Because if you look at Northeast and northern, most of the northern so-called backward states, most of the working population is actually not there. So how does it really work? Because as a lay citizen, I really don't know if a person from Northeast who works in Chennai, what would be the kind of engagement of that person in the regional politics in this state. Maybe the person is already working here for 15, 20 years and the person is using the services and the facilities provided by the state government. What would be the level of engagement of that person vis-a-vis what it would have been if he were in the original state where he came from? So how does a citizen understand this? Thank you.
The answer to both your questions is the same. And the same is like framing it in a slightly different way. Does the political system want to take migration into account? Mr. Ram mentioned Kerala. It's also a great example where the political system has incorporated migrants because it works at the ground level. So your local panchayat will know. Like, and migration to Kerala has happened in an agricultural context. I forget exactly where I read this, but somebody pointed out how the songs that you hear when people are harvesting rice in Kerala are now very different, right? And it's not because somebody is forcibly poaching away. There are no workers available. The farmers are like, these are the people from Bihar are the only ones willing to work. But the government has ensured that, yes, we will admit your children to school. Yes, you will be able to access local facilities. Yes, your children will learn Malayalam. There is a story which always comes once every 2 years that the topper of Malayalam in the state board election is the daughter of a Bihari migrant who put his child into the school.
They looked after them during COVID.
And they looked after them during the pandemic, right?
More than any other.
Yes. When the political system says migrants are important because they're fundamental to how our city, village, taluk, whatever runs, they will get engaged, they will be involved. But when you sort of see them just as disposable resources, which unfortunately is how a lot of our cities see them, they will not be engaged, they will also not respond. There's this, I call it a heartbreaking study, but it's a very, very rigorous academic study, which showed that if you send the same request as a voter from an area, let's say a Tamil speaker from Chennai, to an MLA or to a local municipal member, you send it as, say, a person with a visibly North Indian name who has been settled in Chennai for 15 years, or somebody with a visibly North Indian name settled in the last 4-5 years, the politician responds most to the first request and the least to the last request. And because the politician's logic is simple, I don't know if you will vote. I don't know if tomorrow I can count on you to be part of the party, the political system and the process. But it's not an individual political choice, it is a larger choice being made by the political system which says how important are migrants to this place we are in. When you make that first choice, everything else follows.